1,000-pound British World War II bomb nicknamed Tallboy, causing a massive underwater explosion in Poland. The Polish Navy trying to defuse it. Thankfully, divers were clear of the area at the time. The operation, which started yesterday, was supposed to take 5 days, but wrapped up a bit earlier than expected. A long day in the Senate as the hearing for Judge Amy Coney Barrett hits the marathon stretch. The Supreme Court Justice nominee grilled by Democrats over her previous criticism of Roe v. Wade and the Affordable Care Act. And the judge refuses to say if President Trump can delay the election. We're now 3 weeks away from Election Day. President Trump hosting another rally after recovering from COVID tonight in Pennsylvania, while Joe Biden is in Florida. The president's attack on Dr. Anthony Fauci after Fauci called out Trump's campaign for using his words out of context in an ad without his permission. Fauci vowing to stay on the job, quote, no matter who's the president. The latest on the COVID crisis, hospitalizations on the rise in 35 states. The major setback in the race for a vaccine. Human trials suspended after participants suffered an unexplained illness. Early voting now underway. Long lines in Texas today after Georgia set a record on its first day of early voting. Virginia's online registration system crashing on the final day. Someone accidentally cut the cable. And the California Secretary of State joins us to talk about the fight over ballot drop boxes.
They're unauthorized, they're not official, so they're very problematic, they're very concerning, and they need to be taken down immediately.
New developments in the alleged terror plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. An FBI agent testifies some of the alleged militia members also discussed kidnapping the governor of Virginia. Both governors are frequently targeted by President Trump. And if those alleged terrorists were Muslim, how would that change the story? We talked to Arab American voters in Michigan about the issues most important to them.
A lot of times folks think of Arabs as a foreign policy issue. They think of us as foreign in general, and we're more than that.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. It is a grueling process, to be sure. And while there were several takeaways from today's confirmation hearing of Judge Amy Coney Barrett, one moment that stood out in the midst of all the political posturing and deflection today was when she was asked about her reaction to the death of George Floyd. Barrett, who has 2 black children, described how she wept with her daughter, adding that it was very, very personal for her family. It was in stark contrast to her responses during much of the grilling that continues at this hour. Barrett repeatedly deflected questions on issues ranging from Obamacare to abortion, and even defended her ruling against an employee who was fired and claims that his boss used the N-word. Barrett invoked the words of the justice that she was now nominated to replace, the so-called Ginsburg rule, vowing to give no hints, no previews, no forecasts on how she would decide cases if confirmed. Terry Moran leads us off now with what we've learned and where things stand.
Amy Coney Barrett was grilled by senators today, stepping out of the long shadow of her mentor, the late Justice Antonin Scalia.
People say that you're a female Scalia. What would you say?
I would say that Justice Scalia was obviously a mentor. And as I said when I accepted the president's nomination, that his philosophy is mine too. If I'm confirmed, you would not be getting Justice Scalia, you would be getting Justice Barrett.
But what would that mean? Democrats zeroed in on the possibility of a contested presidential election ending up in the Supreme Court, and whether Barrett, if she's confirmed, should even participate in such a case after President Trump has declared he's counting on her and the court to look at the ballots.
Will you commit to recusing yourself from any case arising from a dispute in the presidential election results 3 weeks from now?
I would consider it. Let's see, I certainly hope that all members of the committee have more confidence in my integrity than to think that I would allow myself to be used as a pawn to decide this election for the American people.
But in a striking exchange with Senator Dianne Feinstein, Barrett, who calls herself an originalist following the original meaning of the Constitution, declined to say whether Trump or any president could delay an election.
Does the Constitution give the President of the United States the authority to unilaterally delay a general election under any circumstances? Does federal law?
If I give off-the-cuff answers, then I would be basically a legal pundit, and I don't think we want judges to be legal pundits.
The Constitution is clear. Congress sets the date of the election. On the court ruling guaranteeing same-sex couples the right to marry, she said this.
I'm not going to, as Justice Kagan put it, give a thumbs up or thumbs down to any particular precedent. It's precedent of the Supreme Court that gives same-sex couples the right to marry.
On a woman's right to choose to have an abortion under Roe versus Wade, Barrett in the past has listed a number of cases she believes are super precedents, ones that can't be overruled, and Roe wasn't one of them.
Is Roe a super precedent?
Roe is not a super precedent because calls for its overruling have never ceased, but that doesn't mean that Roe should be overruled. It just means that it doesn't fall on the small handful of cases like Marbury versus Madison and Brown versus the board that no one questions anymore.
And on the Affordable Care Act, which comes before the court the week after the election and which Barrett has sharply criticized.
I'm not here on a mission to destroy the Affordable Care Act. I'm just here to apply the law and adhere to the rule of law.
Republicans pushed back hard on all the questioning.
Have you made any promises or guarantees to anyone about how you might rule on a case or issue that might come before you if you're confirmed to the Supreme Court?
I want to be very, very clear about this, Senator Grassley. The answer is no.
The Democrats claim that you're being put on the Supreme Court so you can vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Is that your agenda?
Absolutely not. I was never asked, and if I had been, that would have been a short conversation.
Perhaps the most emotional moment of the day came when Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois asked Barrett, the mother of 2 black children, about the racial anguish that's erupted in the country this year.
Have you seen the George Floyd video?
I have.
What impact did it have on you?
Senator, as you might imagine, given that I have 2 black children, that was very, very personal for my family. I was there, and my 17-year-old daughter, Vivian, who's adopted from Haiti, all of this was erupting. It was very difficult for her. We wept together in my room. My children, to this point in their lives, have had the benefit of growing up in a cocoon where they have not yet experienced hatred or violence. And for Vivian, you know, to understand that there would be a risk to her brother or the son she might have one day of that kind of brutality has been an ongoing conversation. It's a difficult one for us, like it is for Americans all over the country.
Very personal and powerful response there from Judge Barrett. For more now, let's bring in Terry Moran. Terry, you mentioned super precedents, those rulings that are so established that they cannot be overturned. What can we learn from Barrett's list of these so-called super precedents?
Well, those are the ones, Lindsay, that she says are untouchable by judges because they have been around so long and the country accepts them and embraces them. So you can see that when she talks about Brown versus Board of Education, the one that desegregated America's schools, no one's going to bring a case, and no judge or justice would overrule Brown versus Board. What's notable also are the ones that aren't on there. Roe versus Wade. She said because so many people still clamor for that case to be overturned and overruled, you can't call it a super precedent. The public hasn't embraced it. There are other cases, though, that aren't on her list that you'd think, well, what does that tell you about Amy Coney Barrett? Say the Miranda warnings. They come from Miranda versus Arizona. And we can't imagine somebody getting arrested in this country anymore without being read their constitutional rights. Apparently, Amy Barrett doesn't think that's a super precedent.
Terry Moran for us from the Supreme Court. Thanks, Terry.
Thanks.
And let's listen in right now. Senator Kamala Harris questioning Judge Amy Coney Barrett at this hour about the Affordable Care Act.
My integrity not to even entertain such an idea, and that I wouldn't violate my oath if I were confirmed and heard that case.
So just so I'm clear, and then we can move on, are you saying that you are now, before I said it, aware or not aware that President Trump made these comments about who he would nominate to the United States Supreme Court?
All right, Senator Harris, what I was saying, I thought you initially framed the question as whether I was aware before this nomination process began. And my answer to that question,
if you are aware, were you aware before this hearing began?
So you're changing, you're asking me now whether I was aware before the hearing began?
As a follow-up question, I am, yes.
And what I said was that when I had my calls with Democratic senators, this question came up, and I don't recall, but it may well have been that they referenced those comments in the course of those calls. Even if so, that wasn't something that I heard or saw directly by reading it myself.
Senator Leahy asked you earlier today, but I think it bears repeating. Do you think it is important for the American people to believe that Supreme Court justices are independent and fair and impartial? And that is a yes or no answer, please.
Yes, Senator Harris.
A number of my colleagues have asked you today whether you would recuse yourself from cases on the Affordable Care Act. You did not directly answer their questions, and instead you described a process by which that would work or happen. And so my question is, isn't it true that at the end of that process, regardless of that process, that it would be you who ultimately would make the decision about whether or not you would recuse yourself?
That is true, and I can't have you elicit a commitment from me about how I would make that decision in advance. That would be wrong.
Right, and what I've asked you is that is it not correct that that is the process, that ultimately it would be you and you alone that would make the decision about whether you would be recused? You've already opined on the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act, and that position satisfied the president's promise to only nominate judges who would tear down the Affordable Care Act. And Senate Republicans rushed this process so that you could rule on this very case. The reasonable question about your impartiality will undoubtedly hang over this court's ultimate decision in the Affordable Care Act case if you refuse to recuse yourself. I strongly believe that. Supreme Court justices routinely consider the consequences of their decisions on people's lives. Earlier this year, the Supreme Court ruled against President Trump in his effort to repeal DACA protections for Dreamers. Children, of course, who have arrived in the United States, many before they could talk or walk. Chief Justice Roberts wrote the opinion for a 5-4 majority that included the crucial vote of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The court rejected the Trump administration's attempt to end protections for Dreamers. Chief Justice Roberts said the administration had not taken into consideration the fact that many Dreamers relied on those protections when they started their careers and businesses, when they served in the military of the United States, when they bought homes, and when they started families. Senator Hirono asked you whether it is appropriate for a Supreme Court justice to consider real-world impacts. But you're a sitting judge now. So my question is, in deciding whether to uphold government action, do you currently consider the consequences of your rulings on people's lives?
Well, Senator Harris, that's part of the decision of every case.
And so you do?
Every case has consequences on people's lives, so of course I do in every case. That's part of the judicial decision-making process.
And would you do that as if you are actually voted on the United States Supreme Court? Would you do that there as well?
Senator, considering how the resolution of a dispute will affect parties, will affect people, is part of the judicial decision-making process, and I will continue engaging in that process to the best of my ability.
So if the Affordable Care Act is struck down, more than 100 million Americans with pre-existing conditions like heart disease, diabetes, and cancer would pay more for insurance or be denied coverage entirely. More than 20 million Americans could lose their health coverage entirely, including nearly 3 million Black Americans and over 5 million Latino Americans who received access to health insurance because of the Affordable Care Act. Insurers will once again be able to discriminate against that more than 50% of African Americans and nearly 40% of Latinos with pre-existing conditions. Insurers will be able to deny coverage to more than 1/4 of Native Americans with conditions like diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. All of this in the midst of a pandemic that is not going away anytime soon. A pandemic that, when age is taken into account, has been 3 times as deadly for Black, Latino, Pacific Islander, and Native Americans. A pandemic that has killed approximately 1 in 1,000 Black Americans, 1 in 1,200 Native Americans, and 1 in 1,500 Latino Americans. Judge Barrett, would you consider the 135 million people who gained protections under the Affordable Care Act when deciding a case that challenges that law?
Senator Harris, if I were to be confirmed and conclude that I was able to sit on the case pursuant to the recusal statute, and then if I heard the case and decided the case, I would consider all the protections that Congress put in place. And as I said earlier during this hearing, the question would be figuring out whether Congress, assuming that the mandate is unconstitutional now, whether that, consistent with your intent, this is Congress's law, would permit this act to stand, or whether the flawed portion of it could just be excised out. And that is a question not of what judges want. It's not a question of the Supreme Court. It's a question of what Congress wanted in the statute. And that is the statute, that you enacted and extended this health care coverage to millions of Americans.
What weight would you give the fact
to the confirmation hearing of Amy Coney Barrett? And for more analysis of today's confirmation hearing, let's bring in ABC senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer. Thanks so much for joining us, Devin. So Amy Coney Barrett just answered in response to a question from Senator Harris. I can't have you elicit a response from me. That would be wrong. We've heard variations on that answer throughout the day from the judge. Do you think that Senator Harris has been so far able to move the needle at all?
Well, she shot into stardom, Lindsay, when she was grilling Justice Brett Kavanaugh. I have to say, watching just a little bit of that there, it's a lot tougher for senators to hold a nominee's feet to the fire when you're over Zoom. But it's interesting because so much of what we've seen the past 24 hours has been about the 2020 campaign. And this is a big star moment for Kamala Harris. And I suspect we will see some of those exchanges appear in digital ads very soon.
And while Judge Barrett often would not say her position, Democrats today repeatedly highlighted Republicans' own words, their platform, and the president's tweets to showcase that they must know her positions on several controversial issues. Take a listen.
One of President Trump's campaign promises in 2015 was that his judicial appointments will do the right thing on Obamacare. You can see it right here. And in fact, Judge, just one day after you were nominated, this is like a few weeks ago, he said also on Twitter that it would be a big win if the Supreme Court strikes down the health law. So, Judge, my first question, do you think we should take the president at his word when he says his nominee will do the right thing and overturn the Affordable Care Act?
Senator Klobuchar, I can't really speak to what the president has said on Twitter. He hasn't said any of that to me.
Devin, do you get the sense that Judge Barrett could be a rubber stamp for Republicans and President Trump?
Well, hey, Lindsay, it's safe to say many Republicans, certainly the president, would love a rubber stamp justice here. But if there's one thing we learned in the Supreme Court this past term, it's that a lot of times these justices are not rubber stamps of the presidents who appoint them. Just take a look at Justice Neil Gorsuch, of course, put on the court by President Trump. He voted against the president, authored that opinion upholding anti-discrimination protections for LGBTQ Americans. And then you had the unanimous opinion of the Supreme Court, including Justice Brett Kavanaugh, upholding those subpoenas for President Trump's tax records in the state of New York. So it can happen that they can go against these presidents. There is no question, though, that Judge Barrett is in a tough spot here. Today, she seemed to make clear that she knew that the president has her in a tough spot. Her credibility is on the line. She doesn't want to be perceived as a rubber stamp, and that's why we heard her say she would not be a pawn for President Trump. She's keeping an open mind on the Affordable Care Act and on same-sex marriage as well. Lindsay?
Of course, watching these hearings can be deeply frustrating, Devin, when the nominee won't answer questions, even generally about such important issues like health care and abortion rights. We certainly saw that again today. How does Judge Barrett compare to other recent nominees on that count?
It can be so maddening to watch these things and not hear a direct answer. Judge Barrett today invoked the words of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who back in 1993 really set the standard for how these hearings would go. Ginsburg said at the time that a judge should offer no hints, no previews, no forecasts of how she might rule. And today, Judge Barrett used those words as a shield against some pretty tough questions. Take a listen.
A judge sworn to decide impartially can offer no forecasts, no hints, for that would show not only disregard for the specifics of the particular case, it would display disdain for the entire judicial process.
Justice Ginsburg, with her characteristic pithiness, used this to describe how a nominee should comport herself at a hearing. No hints, no previews, no forecasts. That had been the practice of nominees before her, but everybody calls it the Ginsburg rule because she stated it so concisely, and it's been the practice of every nominee since.
And nominees on both sides of the aisle certainly have invoked the Ginsburg rule, but we should say that today Judge Barrett did sort of break from precedent set by Justice Ginsburg on a couple of counts. One involving the issue of abortion. Justice Ginsburg was quite unambiguous about her position on abortion back in 1993. She was open with the committee. She said she supported abortion rights. Today, as we saw, Judge Barrett danced around that issue. She deflected despite her pretty clear paper trail of where she stands opposing abortion. She was also asked about President Trump's push to potentially change the date of the 2020 election, something that is set in stone very clearly in the Constitution. It says Congress sets the date of the election. Judge Barrett wouldn't even go there and back that up, Lindsay. So certainly another maddening day to any average viewer trying to look for some direct answers in these hearings.
Yeah, the dodgeball game continues. Devin Dwyer, thank you so much.
Thanks, Lindsay.
And now to the race for the White House with just 21 days to Election Day. President Trump heading out for his second of 6 rallies scheduled this week, while Joe Biden is courting seniors in the battleground state of Florida. And he'll soon get some help on the campaign trail from former President Obama. ABC's Mary Bruce has the latest.
Joe Biden today in the key state of Florida, declaring President Trump has learned nothing from his own battle with the coronavirus. Biden labeling the president's behavior reckless and unconscionable.
I prayed for his recovery when he got COVID, and I'd hoped at least he'd come out of it somewhat chastened. But what has he done? He's just doubled down on the misinformation he did before and making it worse.
Biden with a personal pitch to seniors. They went for Trump in 2016, but this year, Biden has the edge. Seniors, the group most vulnerable to this virus.
Well, he throws super spreader parties at the White House where Republicans hug each other without concern to the consequences. How many of you have been unable to hug your grandkids in the last 7 months? I got 6 of them.
Trump also in Florida overnight, taking a victory lap just 1 week after he was released from the hospital.
I went through it. Now they say I'm immune. I feel so powerful. I'll walk into that audience. I'll walk in there. I'll kiss everyone in that audience. I'll kiss the guys and the beautiful women and everybody. I'll just give you a big fat kiss.
But Dr. Anthony Fauci says the president is sending the wrong message, saying because he is such a visible figure, it amplifies some of that misunderstanding that people have, that it's a benign disease and nobody has anything to worry about. But standing in front of the crowd, the president reveling in the applause, his supporters glad to see him back out on the trail.
It shows people it's not deadly and as fearful as the media's making it be.
But Wisconsin bar owner Mark Schultz has been watching from his hospital bed. He has COVID and is furious.
There are no guarantees. You got to lead by example. You know, you just don't frickin' get it. It's
certainly some strong criticism of the president there. Mary Bruce joins us now. Mary, Dr. Fauci has disputed the president's claims of being immune, and he's also pushed back on that Trump campaign ad that Dr. Fauci says took him out of context. The president, though, going after him today on that again.
Yeah, and the president is really trying to have it both ways here. Today, he lashed out at Fauci on Twitter, saying his, quote, pitching arm is far more accurate than his prognostications, a reference to Fauci's rather unfortunate attempt to throw out the first pitch on opening day. But at the same time that he's criticizing Fauci's response to this pandemic, the president is also trying to use Fauci's words to lend credibility to his campaign ads. What is increasingly clear is that Anthony Fauci is pretty fed up with all of this, Lindsay.
And also, Mary, meanwhile, Joe Biden says that he'll soon have some more help on the campaign trail.
Yeah, according to Joe Biden, he's going to be getting a hand from his former partner, President Barack Obama. He says he will be hitting the trail for him soon. It is a move that could help animate Biden's supporters and Democrats as we enter this critical final stretch. Obama, of course, has spoken up powerfully and forcefully in support of Joe Biden, but he has yet to visit any battleground states to have any really in-person campaign events. It sounds like that might be changing soon.
Just 3 weeks away. All right, Mary Bruce, our thanks to you.
Thank you.
And with just 21 days away until the election, early voting is off to a record start, already underway in 46 states and Washington, D.C., with at least 11.6 million votes already cast. Georgia and Texas are among the states drawing long lines of early voters today. And our Steve Osunsami is in Atlanta, Georgia, tracking it all.
They say everything is bigger in Texas, and tonight the long lines to the polls are proving it.
I think it just shows that everyone's ready to vote and doesn't want their vote to be suppressed.
Dallas, Austin, El Paso, and many people waiting all day are concerned that this is voter suppression. The governor of Texas is only allowing one drop-off box for mail-in votes per county, and a federal court on Monday agreed. A federal appeals court made a similar decision in Ohio. For now, only one drop-off box in each county. And in California, Republicans who set up more than 50 unofficial ballot drop boxes across the state were told to take them down. They have so far refused to do so, saying they are well within the law.
As soon as there was any sort of confusion or concern, we called them to remove the box.
Leading the charge against what she says is voter suppression is Stacey Abrams of Georgia, who ran for governor and lost in a close race where black voters were thrown off the voting rolls. She says the system of putting on elections is purposefully complicated so that voters don't know who to blame for the issues.
There have been battles being waged across the country, including in Georgia, about who has access to in-person early voting. But we know across the country, early voting is going to become the next front in the war against voters.
The president has been telling his supporters that he doesn't trust the process either.
I'm urging my supporters to go into the polls and watch very carefully, because that's what has to happen.
What should I be telling people about all of these concerns, about the long lines, about how long it takes to vote? Pack your patience, pack a sense of humor, but stay excited, stay enthusiastic.
Certainly, patience and polling seem to go hand in hand these days. Steve Osunsami joins us now. And Steve, those long lines are remarkable with weeks still to go before the election. It seems like people are committed to getting those votes in early.
People are, and a lot of people who I talked with in line tell us that they're really concerned about sending their vote in the mail, that they don't trust it, that they actually want to see their vote counted. They want to know that their ballot is actually going into the machine, that their vote matters. And so there's a lot of distrust in the system, and you can argue over who put it there or whether it was there in the first place, but we're hearing this from voters across the political spectrum. And, you know, one point I want to underline that Stacey Abrams made, who we talked with in the piece, she points out that the process behind elections, she believes, is purposefully confusing so that when there are issues, voters won't know who to blame. Lindsay?
And Steve, we did hear specifically about a problem in Virginia with their voter registration system today. Explain for us what happened.
So that was a weird accident, just another issue, another election issue that really wasn't the result of malfeasance. In Virginia, it was the last day to register to vote, and the website where voters went to register went down temporarily after a construction crew accidentally cut fiber lines. That website is now back up and running. Everything is back to normal in Virginia. Voters can register.
All right, good to know. Steve Osunsami, thanks as always for your reporting. And now to the new setbacks in the race for vaccine and new treatments. Johnson & Johnson suspending its vaccine trial because of a volunteer's unexplained illness. And late today, Eli Lilly moved to suspend its trial of an experimental antibody treatment like the one used to treat President Trump. It comes amid rising hospitalizations in dozens of states, with Wisconsin reaching a record daily high in cases and in deaths. A field hospital will now treat patients there for the first time tomorrow. Our Stephanie Ramos is in Milwaukee.
Tonight, Eli Lilly confirming a pause in its trial of an antibody treatment after a potential safety concern, now under review. It's a different antibody treatment than the one taken by the president. This latest setback coming just a day after Johnson & Johnson paused its vaccine trial when a volunteer became sick. It's not known if the illness is related to the vaccine. Johnson & Johnson now the second major vaccine maker to pause its trial after AstraZeneca.
My expectation is that they're going to sort this out. And whether it's this vaccine or a different one, that we will have something approved for emergency use probably in November, maybe December.
The need for effective treatments and vaccines more urgent than ever. This field hospital in Milwaukee now ready to take up to 550 patients. Wisconsin, one of 35 states where hospitalizations are climbing. 64-year-old Ken Holmes battled the virus for 3 weeks in the hospital.
You're afraid to fall asleep. It's because you don't know if you're going to wake up.
Ken telling us how grateful he was to go home.
The doctors and nurses aren't just heroes, they're angels.
Who saved your life?
Oh, without a doubt.
Lindsay, it's not clear in the vaccine or antibody trials that have been paused whether these volunteers received placebo or the real thing. But an independent monitoring board will now take a look at what happened and determine whether it's related to the vaccine or antibodies. Doctors say these developments are common in clinical trials. Lindsay.
All right, our thanks to you. And we are learning more tonight about the alleged domestic terror plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer and the other target that the group discussed. The FBI agent testified today the militia group considered dressing as pizza delivery men to attack the governor. 13 men were arrested in the scheme, 5 of them appearing in federal court for a bond hearing today. That FBI agent also testified the group talked about kidnapping Virginia Governor Ralph Northam. Northam today said he will not be intimidated and, like Governor Whitmer, accused the president of being complicit. And when we come back, Arab Americans are a key voting bloc in the critical swing state of Michigan. And tonight, some of them are asking if those militants accused of plotting against their governor were Muslim, would there be more outrage? You'll hear parts of the 911 call made by the South Dakota AG after he struck and killed a man. And that ceasefire between Armenia and Azerbaijan is now in jeopardy. We'll update you with the latest on that conflict.
COVID-19 was a wake-up call. There are so many more pandemics that could be just around the corner. Viruses literally travel through human populations. What we've got to do is go to those places where the virus begins its journey. Masks on? Yep. Masks on.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my God.
This is the exact way in which a new virus could start.
Virus Hunters special event Sunday, November 1st at 9 on National Geographic.
Right now, after a presidential debate unlike any we've ever seen, after the president tested positive for COVID, with so much on the line, Thursday night on ABC, real voters put their questions directly to presidential candidate Joe Biden. First, there was the ABC News President Trump town hall. Now it's his turn. Joe Biden, the ABC town hall event with George Stephanopoulos, the 2020 newsmaking special, Thursday night, live, starting at 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 5 Pacific on ABC.
The investigation into the cause of a deadly crash involving South Dakota's Attorney General continues. But tonight, for the first time, we are hearing the phone call that the AG made after he struck and killed a man walking along the highway at night last September. Take a listen.
Are you injured at all, Jason?
I am not, but my car sure as hell is.
You think it was a deer or something? Did you vomiting?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it was right in the roadway, and
Victim's body was found the next day. The AG's toxicology report was negative for drugs or alcohol. While some state polls have Joe Biden widening his lead over President Donald Trump, the crucial battlegrounds where the election will be fought will likely all come down to voter turnout. That includes states like Michigan, which Trump carried by just 0.25% back in 2016. That's why every community of voters could be crucial, including the state's large Arab American population. So ABC's Zareen Shah set out to see what's motivating Arab American voters in Michigan with just 21 days to Election Day.
Are you going to vote on November 3rd?
I'm voting on November 3rd.
Okay, thank you so much. You pledged to vote.
Isra Daraise with the National Network of Arab American Communities is hitting the pavement, working to keep Arab Americans from falling through the cracks.
I feel that a lot of times folks think of Arabs as a foreign policy issue. They think of us as foreign in general, and we're more than that.
They're racing against the clock to convince more Arab Americans to vote, aware their community of thousands could play a critical role in next month's election in battleground Michigan. In 2016, out of nearly 5 million votes cast and counted, less than 11,000 votes swung the state to Donald Trump. But that could change this time. Recent state polls already favor Joe Biden. And Michigan is home to over 200,000 Arab Americans, according to estimates from the Arab American Institute, many of them now energized by opposition to President Trump. Across Michigan, Arab Americans are trying to get their community's voices heard. Devin Batish works for the nonpartisan Arab American Heritage Council in Michigan, working the phones to get residents in the state registered.
There are a couple different states that have major Arab American populations: New York, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, California, Florida.
He says their opinion matters not only in Michigan, but also nationwide.
States that I believe Trump carried in the 2016 election that were won only by couple tens of thousands of votes or maybe 100,000 votes, those could be partially swung because of Arab American civic participation in those states.
That participation is frequently credited with giving Bernie Sanders his primary win in Michigan over Hillary Clinton.
There was extremely high turnout for voting. There was pizza being ordered just to keep the lines active and people not to get out of them.
She's seeing the same kind of enthusiasm this time, registering over 500 Arab Americans to vote in just the last couple weeks.
I definitely think it could make a difference. It's made a difference in 2016.
With immigrants from many countries, there is no monolith Arab American community in Michigan. But topics like inclusion and foreign policy are often big for voters like Qasim Daklala.
I think trying to get to some level of normalcy where the president doesn't want to exclude you from America, I think is something the community is excited about.
Some Arab Americans also sense a double standard in a recent alleged terrorist plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan. The incident potentially hitting a nerve for voters.
Had they been Muslims, perhaps, I think the level of coverage and the type of coverage that the plot would have gotten would have been a little bit different. I think some people were loath to call their actions terrorist, but they clearly are terrorist actions.
Daklala says he feels how Trump has specifically handled many recent issues, including race, partisanship, and foreign policy, helps Biden in the state, even though he and many others were originally Bernie loyalists.
I think at first it started off as anybody but Trump, but now I feel like Biden and Harris specifically are garnering support within the community.
But there are some who are firmly focused on re-electing President Trump.
You know, some of my friends would look at me and they say, oh, I'm just like the bad apple of the Muslim community.
Supporters like Abdul Latif Al-Jami says Trump actually brought him over to the Republican Party in 2016. He credits President Trump with strengthening the military, supporting law enforcement and the economy.
I think that Americans are wealthier now. I mean, seriously, nobody was able to save any money. Now, everybody that I know, all my clients, all my friends, everybody has safety money now.
Al-Jami says he believes many of Trump's beliefs match what's culturally accepted in his community.
So they're against abortion, and they're against, they're against gay marriages. And if Muslims really look closely, I think the Republican Party is more identical to their belief system.
But while he thinks most other Michigan Americans will turn out for Biden, he's holding out hope less vocal Trump supporters could once again surprise the country.
I feel like that there's a lot of Arab Americans that are going to vote for Donald Trump, and I think they're just afraid to show it out loud and talk about it out loud.
Our thanks to Zareen for that. And still ahead here on Prime News tonight of the health of one of the world's biggest sports stars. Amy Robach's conversation with a former member of an alleged sex cult who claims she was brainwashed and branded, how it all ended. And our look at how many ballots may be tossed out this election cycle and how that could impact the vote. But first, our tweet of the day. Actor Charlie Sheen remembering one of his co-stars from his show 2.5 Men, actress Conchata Ferrell, dead at the age of 77.
It was almost like a scene from any romantic love story.
He was the closest thing to Prince Charming.
That George Clooney type of feel, that salt, pepper, gray, sexy.
He was gorgeous.
He would record these video love messages to me.
I love you, my love.
I love you so very much.
That was truly being swept off my feet. The very first thing he told me was Andrea Bocelli was going to be singing in the church. And then he added John Legend. Then it was Elton John.
The Beckhams, the Obamas, the Clintons.
We're getting married by the Pope.
Oh my God.
What?
Oh my God! No, I'm not joking. We're getting married by the Pope.
But it's complicated. If you think you're too smart and you would never ever fall for a con, don't be so sure.
Oh my God, what if this is all a lie?
Now, just wait till you see what she does next to get even.
I'm Whoopi Goldberg, and this is The Con.
Premieres Wednesday night on ABC.
Welcome back, everybody. An unprecedented number of U.S. voters are mailing in their ballots this year, many in states where election rules have recently changed. We take a look at why this could mean more rejected ballots and voter disenfranchisement by the numbers. Less than 1% of the 33.4 million absentee ballots cast in 2016 were rejected. But this year, voters without experience voting by mail are up to 3 times more likely to have their ballots rejected. More than 550,000 absentee ballots were returned uncounted in this year's presidential primaries, according to an analysis by NPR from just the 30 states that reported this data. By comparison, only 318,709 were rejected in the 2016 general election, where turnout was much higher. And there's evidence that young voters and voters of color are disproportionately impacted. For example, black voters in North Carolina have been 4 times more likely than white voters to have their mail ballots sent back, according to state data. And in Florida, one study found that voters aged 18 to 21 were 8 times more likely to have their mail-in ballots rejected than voters older than 65 in 2016 and 2018. 25 states now plan to notify voters of problems with their ballots and give them a chance to fix them. Election experts say ballots are more commonly rejected because they arrive late, they're missing a signature, or the signature simply does not match the one on file. And we still have so much more to get to here on Prime tonight. California Republican groups refusing cease and desist orders and continuing to put what election officials are calling illegal ballot boxes across the state. We'll speak with the Secretary of State there about the controversy. What would you do if you were out on a walk and saw this? And the new iPhones, they are out. What makes these different than the older versions? We'll tell you what Apple is saying. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
Right now, after a presidential debate unlike any we've ever seen, after the president tested positive for COVID, with so much on the line, Thursday night on ABC, real voters put their questions directly to presidential candidate Joe Biden. First, there was the ABC News President Trump Town Hall. Now it's his turn. Joe Biden, the ABC Town Hall event with George Stephanopoulos, the 2020 Newsmaking Special, Thursday night, live, starting at 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 5 Pacific on ABC.
Welcome to Disney Plus. Are you ready? Drop in and explore. The action, the adventure, and the originals. There's no limit to what you'll find. These are your worlds. So come on, dive deeper into the universes you love. Wherever and whenever you want them, you'll find them all here on Disney Plus.
Today, lawmakers getting their first crack at questioning President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
Do you commit to recusing yourself from any case arising from a dispute in the presidential election?
I do assure you of my integrity, and I do assure you that I would take that question very seriously.
Democratic senators arguing that Barrett serving on the nation's highest court will doom the fate of the Affordable Care Act and its protections for tens of millions of Americans with pre-existing conditions. But Barrett affirming her independence, telling senators she's not beholden to anyone.
Do you agree with Justice Scalia's view that Roe was wrongly decided?
Senator, I completely fully understand why you are asking the question, but again, I can't pre-commit or say, yes, I'm going in with some agenda, because I'm not.
The number of COVID-19 cases increasing in more than half the country, with hospitalizations up in 35 states.
You're here alone, and this isn't where I want to be.
Leaders in Oklahoma City warned Tuesday morning there were no open ICU beds left in the entire city. And in Wisconsin, this field hospital activated, opening up additional space after the number of people hospitalized in the state nearly tripled in a month.
Here's the bottom line, folks. We have to get this virus under control and help flatten the curve.
The world's top-ranked golfer Dustin Johnson has COVID, feeling symptoms withdrawing from this weekend's PGA Tour event. And soccer star Cristiano Ronaldo also testing positive, now in isolation.
Fighting is continuing again between Armenia and Azerbaijan as the 4-day-old ceasefire brokered by Russia continues to struggle to hold. After a relatively quiet night, Armenia has accused Azerbaijan of renewing operations around the disputed enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh. Russia's defense minister has called his counterpart in Turkey, which is Azerbaijan's key backer. The Turkish minister repeated Azerbaijan's claims that Armenia is violating the ceasefire and demanded Armenia withdraw from occupied lands.
Go away! No. For 6 heart-pumping minutes, hiker Kyle Burgess came face-to-face with a cougar in Slate Canyon, Utah.
Probably like halfway into the video, she got within 4 feet of me.
He pulled out his phone to take a video when he came across what he thought were wild kittens. That's when he noticed the cougar lurking behind, and he started backing away. The big cat following, then lunging when Burgess briefly turned his back. After several tense minutes, Burgess throws a rock at the cougar, who dodges it and finally flees.
Introducing iPhone 12.
Apple unveiled 4 new iPhones that can be used with faster 5G wireless networks, all in anticipation of when 5G becomes widely available. The iPhone 12 has the same 6.1-inch display as the iPhone 11, but is lighter and thinner. There's also a smaller iPhone 12 mini and iPhone 12 Pro with, they say, a more powerful camera, and the 12 Pro Max with a 6.7-inch display. The various models become available this month or next month, with starting prices ranging from $700 to $1,100. In addition, Apple says the phone should be more durable than previous ones, but in a move that is sure to annoy a lot of customers, charging adapters will no longer come with each phone. They're actually going to be sold separately.
Now to the battle over ballot drop-off boxes, those secure boxes where voters can drop off their ballots before Election Day in many states. Over the weekend in California, reports surfaced that unofficial drop boxes were showing up at unauthorized locations in Los Angeles, Fresno, and Orange counties, including outside gun stores and churches. It turns out those drop boxes were put in place by the California Republican Party to collect ballots, but state officials are calling these boxes illegal and say they could lead to voter fraud. That's the focus of tonight's Ballot Watch. And for more on this, we're joined now by California Secretary of State Alex Padilla. Mr. Padilla, you've sent a cease and desist order to the California GOP and county Republican parties and called for them to remove those boxes, saying that they violate state law. First, just to explain to our viewers the problem with the use of these unauthorized drop boxes and why you believe that they should be removed.
Well, first of all, I mean, it's clear they're unauthorized. They're not official. They've been misrepresented as official ballot drop boxes. So already misleading voters, number one. Number two, it's clear in California, voters have multiple safe options for how to return their vote by mail ballots, because every active registered voter is receiving a mail-in ballot because of the COVID-19 pandemic. They can be returned through the Postal Service. They can be returned to any official secure ballot drop box. They can be walked in person to any in-person voting location during the early voting period or on Election Day. But to have, regardless of who's behind it, unofficial ballot drop boxes represented as official drop boxes is both a threat to the security of the election and to voter confidence.
Now, the California GOP is resisting your call to remove these boxes, arguing that they are legal under new laws that allow ballots to be collected by third parties. Yesterday, they tweeted, if a congregation, business, or other group provides the option to its parishioners, associates, or colleagues to drop off their ballot in a safe location with people they trust, rather than handing it over to a stranger who knocks on their door, what is wrong with that? And they added this, the way Democrats wrote the law, if we wanted to use a Santa bag, we could. A locked, heavy box seems a lot safer. Now, they argue that there's nothing in state laws passed by Democrats that would restrict these sorts of collections and that these ballots do not require an authorized signature designating who's collecting it. What's your response to that?
My response is clear. What they're suggesting is simply not true. If they want to understand state law, they ought to read it, and we've laid it out for them in the cease and desist order. Is ballot collection activity allowed in California? Yes, but even then, both the voter has to sign the outside of the vote by mail return envelope, as does the person that they choose to trust to return their ballot for them if they need assistance. That connection is lost with these misleading, unofficial, insecure ballot drop boxes. Any voter that's been misled to delivering their ballot to a fake ballot drop box does not know who they're surrendering their ballot to. The word official implies that if it's an official, that it's a county controlled ballot drop box. See, ballot drop boxes are a good option in California, but only counties are authorized to provide them, and they meet strict regulations and requirements in terms of their construction, their installation, how often ballots are retrieved and delivered to the county, and by who. Only county elections workers are allowed to retrieve ballots from ballot drop boxes. Any unofficial drop box, we cannot vouch for the security of it or who's taking possession of a ballot. So they're very problematic, they're very concerning, and they need to be taken down immediately.
So if the California GOP continues to resist removing these boxes, what action will your office and the state attorney general's office take? Could there be any criminal prosecution here?
There could very well be, and that's why we have laid out in the cease and desist order the specific areas of state law that they are in violation of. So the ball's in their court. If there's not immediate compliance, then the Attorney General is ready and prepared to exercise any legal options to protect the integrity of the vote and ensure the confidence of all voters in the integrity of their election. Sadly, it's made our job a lot harder. We now have to remind all voters of their multiple safe options for returning their ballots, and any voter who might have been duped into surrendering their ballot to one of these unofficial drop boxes, we're asking them to go to vote.ca.gov, sign up under Where's My Ballot to receive notifications on the status of their ballot, including confirmation if their ballot's been received by the county and when it's counted.
And you really just touched on this, but is there any other message beyond that specifically to voters in California who may be confused by all this and are now concerned about using any ballot drop boxes, including those officially sanctioned by the state?
Right. So again, we continue to work hard to remind voters of their multiple safe options for returning their ballots by mail, in person, or to any official ballot drop box. How do you tell what's official and unofficial? Number one, you look at the box themselves. They must have the county seal on them. And for folks thinking of getting too cute here, abuse of a county seal is another violation of the law. And for an official listing of ballot drop boxes in your county, voters can go to the county elections website or the Secretary of State's website at vote.ca.gov.
California Secretary of State Alex Padilla, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Stay safe.
You too. And now to an ABC News exclusive with a former member of the alleged sex cult NXIVM, India Oxenberg, speaking for the first time about her claims that she was brainwashed and branded by the group's founder and how her mother, Dynasty star Catherine Oxenberg, helped rescue her. They both sat down with Amy Robach.
This morning, India Oxenberg, daughter of TV star and real-life royalty Catherine Oxenberg, is breaking her silence, speaking out for the first time since breaking free from the so-called cult NXIVM.
What I thought I was learning was self-help and personal growth. What I was learning was the opposite. It was inhumane.
I'm an interesting person. I'm a controversial person, but most importantly, I'm an unconventional person.
India joined what she thought was a self-help group run by Keith Raniere. a self-proclaimed guru who bragged about what he describes as his superior intellect when she was just 19 years old and looking for purpose. Her mother, Catherine, who starred in the hit show Dynasty,
my name's Amanda,
actually took India to her first meeting.
You and your mom went into NXIVM together initially, but then you say almost immediately they were trying to break that connection.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was all strategic, and we were unaware of why they were doing that at the time. But it's actually something that I learned later on called parental alienation.
India spent nearly 7 years in the organization, paying them nearly $100,000. She says she was slowly being brainwashed, but couldn't see it while it was happening.
That's years of grooming, and when you're unaware, it's so easy to be led astray, especially by people who are masters at manipulation, and these people were that. Especially Keith Raniere, he's a master at manipulation. If there's one thing he's intelligent at, it's that. And he's a predator.
Prosecutors say Raniere was a con man and a predator who took advantage of women. They say Raniere, who called himself Vanguard, created a secret sorority inside the group where women were made to be his sex slaves and blackmailed with what they called collateral, like family secrets and nude photos.
I can explain later. I did what I had to do.
India says Smallville actress Allison Mack introduced her to the society under the guise of female empowerment.
So one would say authenticity is being as you are and expressing as you are.
I don't know why, that makes me want to cry. It's beautiful.
It was a trap, and it was a ploy for Keith to enslave women for his own sexual desires.
When did your relationship with Keith become sexual?
The relationship took a different turn and became sexual when I was commanded to do a seduction assignment. That was the beginning of continual sexual abuse, and I didn't see it as that at the time.
Now that you can look back on it, how would you describe that sexual relationship?
I would describe that sexual relationship as rape. I had given collateral, which automatically removes my choice. So I did not have the option to say no. Saying no meant hurting my family or hurting my friends, and I wasn't going to do that.
In the new Stars documentary, Seduced, Inside the NXIVM Cult, India returns to the house where she says she and others were held down and branded with Raniere's initials.
That window is where it happened. I was the first woman in my group of slaves to be branded.
Tell me about the night you were branded.
It was horrible. At the time, I thought I was doing this empowering bonding moment with a group of friends that I considered my nearest and dearest.
And you had no idea that it was Keith's initials. I remember that.
I mean, that's the real thing, is that we were told that it was a symbol of the elements and that this was going to be a bonding experience. And we were sleep deprived. We were starved. We were coerced. You don't just decide to be branded. You're coerced into being branded.
For years, Catherine fought publicly and behind the scenes to free India from the group.
How's your daughter doing, and have you spoken with her?
My daughter is still on the inside. She's not back yet.
It took until 2018, after Raniere and Mack were arrested, for India to finally come around.
Did you always believe, Catherine, that this day would come, or did you fear that it wouldn't?
God, I lived in fear for probably 2 years, but my faith has always been stronger than my fear, always.
Is there any other way to describe what was happening to your daughter other than she was brainwashed? This is not the daughter that you knew.
When I first confronted her at the end of May in 2017, I thought I could wake her up. I told her she was brainwashed and she was in a cult, and I said, I know about the blackmail, and I don't care if it's about me. Don't let that be the reason you stay in.
Why didn't what your mom was telling you resonate with you, India, at that time?
I was too deeply in. I was scared, and I was confused.
What was that moment when you woke up?
It was stages of revelations. And I started working with the deprogrammer, who helped me tremendously. But you have to be open to it. Like, you can't force somebody to see the truth. They need to want to. And I didn't want to for a long time.
Getting somebody out of a cult is very different than a drug intervention, for instance, because their critical thinking has been taken away. And so the process of working with a cult defector is to reawaken and reignite their critical thinking, and through a line of questioning to help them start to think for themselves. So it's very gentle, it's very different.
What do you want everyone to take away from your story?
You don't have to be in a cult to be coerced.
I don't know anybody on the planet who hasn't been manipulated
or fooled
or exploited or fooled in some way, or has been in a controlling, abusive relationship. You know, there's predation on so many different levels.
We all have metaphorical scars. I have a physical scar, but you don't have to live with that. You don't have to live with Keith Raniere haunting you. You can reclaim your life. You can learn from it, and you can move on. And you can heal, and you can have love. And I just feel so lucky that I can have that.
Our thanks to Amy for that. And before we go tonight, our image of the day. Take a look at this one. Daw-Thien Kin. She took this photo posing at her home in Yangon, Myanmar. She is 100 years old and just beat COVID. Still has more living to do. And that is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us, and good night.